This episode is brought to you by Audible.com. If you like listening to beautiful voices like ours instead of reading words, then head on over to Audible, where you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/paratruth, where you can choose from over 180,000 titles for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Christian and non-Christian paranormal investigators. They have two different views, and it seems as if neither of them can ever agree on anything. So what happens when a mainstream view of the paranormal crosses paths with a Christian view? Something epic. This is Paranormal Radio.
How's it going, Paratruthers? Welcome to a brand new episode of Paratruth Radio. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
And while you're listening to the show tonight, check out our website, paratruthradio.com, where you can learn more about us and what we do. Also, feel free to look into our Patreon account at paratruthradio.com and help us to continue bringing the world fresh, entertaining media each and every week.
By contributing, you'll become an executive producer of an upcoming episode of Paratruth Radio and officially become part of the Paratruth family, which will include special monthly behind-the-scenes access to our production. Quick note on that, folks. For those of you who have went ahead and contributed to the Patreon account, I know you've been waiting for a little while for our behind-the-scenes stuff. That will be coming to you at the end of this week, so be patient. It's on its way.
Absolutely. And I think you guys will be really interested in this stuff just because we can get a little quacky in the behind the scenes stuff because we're goofballs. I mean, if you can't tell by our show already, we're goofballs. This week we've got a pretty interesting topic. We've got the smells of the paranormal.
Now Paratruth presents The Paranormal Stinks with special guest Joshua Cutchin. Alright folks, so many paranormal newbies enter their first paranormal investigation relying on just two senses, sight and sound. However, we have another sense that is readily available to us if we choose to use it. That sense is smell. Joshua Cutchin is a new and upcoming author. His first book was A Trojan Feast, the food and drink offerings of aliens, fairies, and Sasquatch. Today, he joins us to discuss his latest penmanship, The Brimstone Deceit, an in-depth examination of supernatural scents, otherworldly odors, and monstrous miasmas.
Josh, welcome back to Paratruth Radio. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well. It's a pleasure to be here.
To start off with, I think I'll ask the question that your first chapter asks, and that's why smells?
Well, you know, a lot of what I've been trying to do ever since I got started in sort of the paranormal writing realm is to really look at things that everybody else has sort of overlooked. I think that there could possibly be some really important details in there that we have overlooked. And perhaps within those details, if we can take something tiny and sort of mundane, perhaps we might actually gain some greater insight than trying to go full bore, trying to solve, these big questions like, are there UFOs, do ghosts exist, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But it was one of those things where I'd noticed throughout my life, just being a fan of Fortiana, that there was a strong consistency in the way a lot of these phenomena smell, and a lot of sort of crossover in between these different fields that people sort of want to put into their own little discrete categories. Like, well, we've got the ghost over here, and we've got the Sasquatch over here, and the UFOs over here. I noticed a lot of consistencies there, and I thought that perhaps it might be a thread worth pulling on, so to speak.
Okay.
Well, now, when it comes to paranormal investigations, we see many people, unfortunately, who are using things such as the ghost box as evidence. when it comes to smells, we know I don't know if you ever have, Josh, but Justin and I have come across smells in the past during investigations, whether it be perfume or rotten egg type smell or anything like that. But do you think, based on your own research, that a scent can be used in maybe confirming a paranormal haunting, or is it something that's just used to kind of help guide your investigation?
I think it's sort of a problem because we don't have anything to record smell, at least in any sort of really consistent way. And smell is something of a subjective sense anyway. I mean, some people are more sensitive to certain odors and some people are not. However, it does imply, I mean, for example, if you think you see an apparition and there is a smell associated with it, that sort of acts as a secondary type of confirmation that can really help reinforce the idea that you actually did see something, simply because we don't usually think of our noses playing tricks on us. It does happen from time to time, but the idea that your eyes and your nose would play a trick on you at the same time, or your ears and your nose at the same time, it's one extra level of confirmation that you can certainly go through.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that I noticed that is a common scent throughout the book is that of sulfur, and that's between spirit, UFO, and Sasquatch encounters, and I'm sure a couple others. Through your research, did you find that they coincided with multiple sightings at all, or was it specific to each individual type of sighting?
So by multiple sightings, you mean just multiple sightings of multiple witnesses during the same event, or
no, like somebody who witnessed a Bigfoot and then eventually witnessed a UFO, or a spirit and a Bigfoot, or something like that.
You know, that's interesting. I don't think I ran into anyone who was a multi-tier witness in terms of witnessing different types of phenomena and noticing that there's a similar scent ascribed. That would be actually an interesting little avenue to research. Having said that, there are instances where these phenomena have been seen together, vaguely speaking, and where people have described smelling a sort of sulfurous odor. I'm thinking of, there's this famous case by Stan Gordon in Pennsylvania where you basically in the course of one evening, witnesses experienced a UFO, Bigfoot phenomena, and a possession, and there was a smell of rotten eggs associated with that sort of sulfur smell that we associate with it. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a lot of stuff I could go into in terms of what people are really smelling when they smell sulfur, because sulfur technically doesn't have an odor. It's sulfur compounds that have an odor. So that's sort of what I get into in the book a little bit, in case anybody's wondering. But at the same time, there have been instances here and there in the book where people would experience what looks kind of like ghost phenomena, but is also associated with sort of ufological phenomena. I'm thinking specifically of something like Our Lady of Fatima, which, incidentally enough, just had its 100th anniversary, I believe, 3 days ago.
Cool. Now, when it comes to the sulfur phenomena, where did it originate? Like, where did this idea that sulfur and demons were associated in some way?
Oh boy. It's really interesting. Sulfur as a compound has, or as an element rather, has a lot has quite a varied and storied history. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it was used specifically for cleansing purposes. It's the same reason that if you get, for example, like a face wash, sometimes it'll have sulfides in it, or, the same reason that if you get certain antibiotics have sulfur in them as well. It was used as a fumigant. It was used as a sort of purifying element in antiquity, as far back as ancient Egypt. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is if you look at the origins of entities from hell, like demons or like Satan, smelling of brimstone, you'll find that it really has its roots in this sort of purification usage. Specifically, if you look at the mentions of sulfur in, otherwise known as brimstone, in the Christian Bible, you'll notice that a lot of times it's used in a positive capacity. For example, God's breath is compared to cleansing sulfur. You'll also notice that when Satan is supposedly cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, it isn't because that's something that Satan would love. It's because it's something that would actually end up torturing him. In that sense, sulfur was sort of used as a stand-in, as a symbol of God's attempt to purify Satan's evil with sulfur, which is really interesting because it sort of turns what a lot of people think on its head. But you can find this link between the divine, between positive spiritual forces and sulfur as far back as ancient Greece. The origins of the word sulfur in Greece, thion, and the deities, Thay, is that sort of that theological sort of same root word. So it's interesting. It's sort of over the time it got co-opted into being something that you associated with demonic activity. It's really interesting if you look at it from like purely a biological standpoint. Human beings are extremely sensitive to sulfur compounds, partially because it can be toxic in certain circumstances. One of my favorite statistics to talk about is the fact that hydrogen sulfide, which is what we normally smell when we say we're smelling sulfur, it's that rotten egg odor, actually has an odor threshold in terms of how people can detect it of 0.47 parts per billion. And to put that into perspective, if you had an ink dropper and dropped a drop of ink into the back of a semi-truck full of water, that would be twice that concentration. So we really are hardwired to notice this, and I think it's somewhat non-coincidental that you'll find these sort of unexplained phenomena smelling that way. Not entirely sure what that means, but I think that there's something important there.
Right, and it's odd that it goes past that barrier of more than just one type of sighting. It's just odd to me. But one thing that I've always associated with smell, because it's actually a common one, is with the Bigfoot and that musky animal smell. Through doing the book, what type of stories did you come across where was it a lot that had the smell only certain times?
Oh, well, Bigfoot is sort of like it's sort of a dream subject when you talk about smell, because the types of smells that are covered with Bigfoot just run the gamut. Even though the book is called The Brimstone Deceit, I go into all sorts of different paranormal smells. So with Bigfoot, you've got, rotten animal flesh, skunk smell, urine smell, ammonia smell, also, the sulfur smell as well. But you find out like the smells of dirt, smells of decay, just the list goes on and on. And some of the things that you'd find are just these hilarious combinations that are sort of mashed up. I'm thinking of one that was someone talking about the Bigfoot that they ran into smelled like roadkill in a dirty diaper. Oh. There's another one that was from Alaska in 1998. This guy saw something digging in the dirt in a ditch by the road. He was riding on his bike, and he said that he got this lungful of this awful gagging smell that was a combination of rotten meat, urine, and damp earth. And it's just it's like this ridiculous grab bag.
Yeah.
My favorite Sasquatch description that I found, it's like the most evocative and it's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard, is there was a guy, and I believe it was 1990 in Idaho, who was cutting wood, and he noticed this awful smell, and he looks up and he sees, this Sasquatch shuffling away from him. And when he was asked by investigators in the follow-up what it reminded him of, he said, well, at one point I worked on a sheep farm as a kid, and whenever one of the sheep would give stillbirth to a lamb, that's sort of what it smelled like. Which is like the most, that's the most visceral example that I can think of, because it was just so awful. But you also do see, all this being said, you also do see, these sort of very animalistic smells like wet dog, you see skunk, and you also see this, this persistent thing of brimstone, of rotten eggs. There was one guy, that I looked into, who, and I believe it was British Columbia, till his dying day, referred to Sasquatch as the fart monster, because it ended up smelling like a fart. So you do see this odd sulfur connection, which really doesn't have a biological precedent in the animal kingdom, which I think is sort of, people will see, the name of this book, The Brimstone Deceit, and assume that it goes down some sort of reductive some sort of reductive, everything's a demon path.
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to that interpretation, but that's definitely not the side that the book takes. I tried to take it as straight down the middle as I could.
Mm-hmm. I just don't understand how people associate to the word association to the smell, and it boggles me, because I guess I've never come across that horrid of a smell, so I don't know how I would associate it. But
that's the impression that I get, is that if you smell Sasquatch in the woods, then you will know, because it's so much unlike anything else. But it's interesting. If you look at, this is an axe that I've been grinding for some time now. If you look at sort of what are called the Type B Bigfoot reports, mm-hmm. which are the ones in, for example, in the BFRO, they categorize them as ones where you have everything but an actual visual sighting. Mm-hmm. You get things like, obviously footprints, but you get things like rocks being thrown, strange smells, strange voices. And it occurred to me that, I didn't necessarily cover this in the book, but it occurred to me that this is kind of almost exactly like poltergeist phenomena. Mm-hmm. And yet, because people are in the woods, they associate it with Bigfoot. And you'll even find some stories of people having rocks tossed at them and the rocks being warm to the touch, which again is another, poltergeist hallmark. So mm-hmm. I think sometimes unless we see a Bigfoot, we should sort of open up our minds to the fact that perhaps there's some sort of other there's something else on sort of this continuum of phenomena that might be happening.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm sure there's a lot of speculation out there regarding the sense of spirits or the smells of spirits. One in particular I've come across in your book is actually you talk about the RMS Queen Mary having this scent of a cigar smoke coming from out of nowhere. And I've actually been on that boat before, and there was one time where we did come across something that kind of smelled like cigar.
Interesting.
But the question is, and I don't know if you came across this or not, but do you think this is something that spirits themselves are capable of actually manifesting? Or is it something that's kind of in a person's mind and they kind of trigger the scent themselves? Like they think they smell it, but the scent isn't really there.
Well, and I would sort of put a third dimension on that too. Okay. In terms of, it's entirely possible for environments to soak up smells, especially something that permeates things as much as cigar smoke. Mm-hmm. Certain environmental factors can actually end up releasing that smell into the environment, with changes in humidity or temperature or whatnot. But I certainly think there's a danger of people being primed, and the fact that, simply by merit of the fact that the two most common spirit smells that you run into are perfume and, cigarettes, tobacco products. Mm-hmm. Simply by merit of that, I think a lot of people are primed to be on the lookout for those sort of things. And I can totally see how you can interpret things just with a little bit of a suggestion. There's this phenomena that a lot of olfactory scientists have talked about called the tip of the nose phenomena, which is a play on the tip of the tongue phenomena in terms of when you try to remember a word and you can't quite nail it down. Similar thing happens with smell. A lot of times smells are recognized before we can put a name to them. So it's entirely possible that a smell of that caliber might be interpreted as cigar smoke. Mm-hmm. In terms of it's interesting to me that I find it odd that a spirit, if we do accept the ghosts as dead people hypothesis, I find it odd that a spirit would even be able to sort of manifest an odor. I don't really know what that says about the standing of smell in terms of the hierarchy of the human senses, but it implies to me that there's something a little bit more metaphysical going on in terms of the way that we interact with our environment through smell. And if you look at some of the science that's out there, nobody really knows exactly how we smell. There are even some people who have posited certain quantum models for the way that we smell. Now, I'm not necessarily one to talk to you about that because I'm not a quantum physicist, but at the same time, it is interesting to me that something as fundamental as smell still has a giant question mark over it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, any of our five senses that they don't. They can say how they think it's happening, but is that really how it's happening? Nobody really knows.
Oh yeah, it's like that sort of middle school thing, which depending on your crowd, it's either your middle school friends or your stoner friends come up to you and go, how do I know that when I'm seeing red, it's the same red that you see? And for the longest time, I thought that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard of until I really started thinking about it. And yeah, I mean, experience itself is suggestive. I mean, right. each one of us, I would posit that if I could jump out of Skype and leap straight into your mind, I would see things a lot different than the way that I see them. And there's little things that would really surprise me in terms of the way that I'm interpreting and processing all this stimuli around me.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So one of the other smells, I guess you could say, that was associated in the book is the smell of ozone with UFOs. Now, when people were smelling ozone, was there a certain thing going on? Had this UFO landed? Had it been swirling around? Where did the ozone smell come into play with UFOs?
Well, it's a little bit all over the place, and it's a little bit of a problematic issue, too, because early on, there was this conflation between ozone and sulfur. People used to think that, again, the idea of I had mentioned how the Greeks associated sulfur with the gods. Well, they associated sulfur with the gods because they thought that when lightning struck, that smell was sulfur. Okay. In reality, we all know that smell is ozone. Mm-hmm. So there is a little bit of a problematic task in front of people who want to look at UFO sightings, because are people really saying ozone when they mean sulfur, and vice versa?
Right.
But in the UFO cases, I mean, I still maintain that sulfur compounds, to be more specific, are the most commonly noted UFO odors. But ozone, I gotta tell you, is a close second. And really, in terms of what these alleged craft, if they are craft, I'm skeptical of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, but these alleged craft, whatever they are, it sort of runs the entire spectrum of activity in terms of ozone. There's not really a set thing in terms of them being landed or them taking off. I do think it's interesting that the creation of ozone is photoelectric. So if there is enough, basically, if light can generate ozone in terms of resonating on the ultraviolet spectrum, mm-hmm. especially in the case of blue or purple light. I mean, the reason that we associate ozone, that smell, with electrical discharges is because that blue electrical discharge is actually igniting and splitting the oxygen molecules, and they rebind from O2 into O3. Oh, okay. So because of that, I sort of took a look at, are there examples of craft with blue or purple lights being seen that also are accompanied by a smell of ozone? And that's actually a pretty significant number of cases I found that was indeed what was happening. So mm-hmm. if there is sort of a link between ozone and something that the craft is doing, it seems like that would be a pretty rewarding way to look.
Okay.
Now, when it comes down to it, let's say we're in an investigation, right? And we smell something. Obviously, if we see something at the corner of our eye, or we get a sound on the radio, we're probably going to go out of our way to try to debunk it, right? So is there a proper way to go about actually debunking a scent if indeed you don't really know where that scent came from to begin with?
Oh boy. That's quite a question. I mean, on sort of a very basic level, the first thing mm-hmm. would be to confirm that other people smell it. There are, because we don't exactly understand how our brains interpret smell, there are certain cases where people misinterpret, or basically their brains fabricate smells whole cloth. Mm-hmm. Phantasmia is the smell of smells that aren't there. A lot of ghost hunters have said that phantasmia means the smell of ghosts. That's not true. Like, if more than one person smells it, it's not neurological phantasmia. Phantasmia is you have a brain disorder that actually generates that smell. There's also some others I can't remember, but one of them is cacosmia, which is the interpretation of pleasant smells as unpleasant smells. So you definitely want to have corroboration from mm-hmm. someone else involved. But because it's difficult to sort of measure how strong an odor is. What you could do is you could measure the amount of nerve stimulation in the nose. I talk later in the book about the trigeminal nerve, which is actually, if anyone has ever taken a big whiff of vinegar and they have this involuntary reaction in their face, that's your trigeminal nerve being stimulated. And most odors do stimulate the trigeminal nerve in some form or fashion. So that might be a possible way to sort of verify that. But for the most part, I mean, yeah, it's interesting. It's still quite a subjective field.
Okay.
So one thought that has occurred to me going through the book and thinking about it a lot, each one of the specific sightings that you had put in there have been associated with what a lot of people in the paranormal community are calling interdimensional now. Do you think that if these things are interdimensional, do you think these smells are from them crossing that interdimensional barrier from their plane to ours, and we're just smelling that odor?
That was something that John Keel was quite a fan of. He actually posited that the smell of hydrogen sulfide, this sort of sulfur smell, might possibly be generated from that. In certain cases, I don't think that if there is an interdimensional component to it, I certainly think that some of these odors might be the case. I mean, for example, ozone would be a great contender for that. It's the release of energy would mean that there was some sort of smell. And you see ozone in a handful of ghost cases, and so it's not just simply limited to stuff like UFOs. But when you have the odor of, for example, of something like hydrogen sulfide or sulfur dioxide, two of the most common sulfur compounds, the amount of energy that would have to be required to sort of, for lack of a better term, ignite the ambient sulfur in the air would be quite astounding. I mean, we're talking about sort of like large hadron collider levels of energy. So I mean, it's possible. I mean, especially if you are an ETHer. It's possible that certain advanced civilizations might have that much energy at their disposal. But to really generate sulfur smell from the pure air without some sort of, at least in terms of the way that we would understand or that we would posit interdimensional travel, doesn't really seem like it makes a lot of sense to me. Then again, I mean, who knows what you use to travel interdimensionally? I mean, for all I know,
right.
For all I know, you crack open a rotten egg and light it on fire or something, and that's interdimensional travel. But to the point, trying to describe something that we don't really have any sort of idea of how that mechanism would work, sort of
right.
A little bit of a dead end, I think.
Well, at least if you were cracking open a rotten egg, that would explain the smell.
It would, And it's not. Hydrogen sulfide, for example, again, this really common rotten egg odor. I mean, it's in all of us. I mean, it's the primary odoriferous component in flatus. People talk about methane being what you fart, but methane is actually odorless. It's actually the hydrogen sulfide along with some other compounds, in particular indole and skatole are in there as well, that actually generate that sort of stinky smell. So it's not impossible that certain flesh and blood entities couldn't just produce this on their own. The question is about the consistency. I mean, if we have this many examples of people smelling this odor, it implies that every single unknown creature has the worst case of gas on the planet.
Right. Yeah. Or to explain it, if when you're doing an investigation, walk up to somebody and be like, "Hey, did you fart? Did you fart?"
Exactly. There's a great anecdote that was sent my way in the course of writing this I think it was Dana Newkirk from Weekend Weird, who was actually on a ghost hunting expedition on Mackinac Island, and she smelled this awful body odor that was sort of associated with an entity on that particular location, and her investigation partner mentioned that they'd noticed it as well, and then followed up with the fact of, well, I actually don't have a sense of smell, but I was able to smell this.
Oh,
it's just like, again, sort of what we were talking about earlier, somehow smell functions on a different level than the way that we think it does.
Right. Yeah.
It's weird. Well, now, between 2015 and 2016, you have 2 books out. So, like, the final question I have here is, what's next on your agenda?
Oh, well, I've already sullied my name by doing this. I guess I'm going to keep on doing it. So, actually, in just a few days, there is a collection of essays that's coming out entitled UFOs Reframing the Debate. It's edited by Robbie Graham, and I was quite flattered to be asked to contribute to that. It's a bunch of people who I really admire, who are also a part of the project. Greg Bishop, Red Pill Junkie, Chris Rutkowski, Mike Cleland. I know there are probably some other people that I'm forgetting too that I should remember. But it's about, I believe it's about 10 to 12 people who are involved in this. So that'll be coming out May 29th rather. Or maybe a couple days before then. And then right now I'm currently working on book number 3. I should be starting writing it in earnest by the end of the month. I've done all my research. I'm just going back through my outline and getting my thoughts in order. And that's going to be on paranormal child abduction from the fairy folklore era all the way through modern ufology. And really what it's going to be is it's a little bit more covered than the other areas that I've been through, but these first 2 books were more of here's a survey and here's an analysis. Here's a survey and here's an analysis. So this is going to give me a little bit of a chance to write something that's a little bit more chronologically oriented, and it's basically I'm hoping that it will support my primary overall thesis, which is that if you take something out of ufology and take something that corresponds out of fairy folklore and you really look at them with a fine-tooth comb, it will yield nearly infinite similarities. I mean, we know that there are all these broad brush strokes between fairy folklore and modern UFO lore are similar, but I contend that you could take one thing and just break it apart and keep on breaking it apart, and you'll see more and more similarities than even people have noted in the past. So that'll probably be out sometime late next year, I think.
Okay.
Well, how you go from tastes and smells to child abduction, I don't know, but it's interesting that you're going along that same path, frame of thought of the coinciding similarities between multiple types of sightings.
That's sort of my thing. I mean, so I didn't want to do the same thing again. So that's part of it. I'm trying to push myself to do something a little bit different. But also, at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of what I do is trying to find some sort of paranormal explanation, because I think that even if you don't think that these all are the same thing, and I think that there are multiple different explanations for each of these things that we see.
Right.
But even if you don't think that they're the same thing, there are definite similarities there that have got to be linked somehow. So I think that, maybe if we could pay a little bit more attention to that, maybe we might make some headway. Oh, and then again, we might not. Who knows?
Well, everybody in the paranormal field is hoping we are at that breaking point, but I honestly am not sure myself. So, all right, Josh, it is about time to let you go. So I do want to give you a chance to tell everybody where they can find you, find the books, and all of that great information.
Well, thanks so much. You can find, I actually am blogging more now than I used to. I don't usually keep my blog in good shape. I post once every 3 or 4 months, but I actually have 2 posts within a month right now that's up there. That's over at joshuacutchin.com, JOSHUACUTCHIN. And then from there you can find links to buy all the books if you're so inclined. Or if you just want to jump straight over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you can find them over there as well. And I am also a regular contributor to the podcast Where Did the Road Go? And you can find that at wheretheroadgo.com.
Awesome.
Right. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Right, thank you.
Hope that we can get you on again when you get the new book done, and we'll talk to you soon.
No, anytime. If you ever need a last-minute fill-in or something, just let me know, okay?
Good to know.
All right, that's good.
All right, take care, guys.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, folks, that was Joshua Cutchin, author of The Brimstone Deceit. I want you guys to check that out. We have let Josh go, but stay tuned. We are not done yet. We are going to be going into the Paratruth post show right after this break.
Hey, this is Eric, and you're about to listen to the audio trailer of my short film, The Revealed, which is now streaming worldwide. Check it out at ericscareback.com, parachuteradio.com, and YouTube. The links are provided in the description of this episode.
Start from the beginning. When did it all begin?
Hello? When we were kids at Old Grove Church.
This has led many scholars to question whether the God that we serve is truly omnipotent, omniscient, spiritual, or simply a New Age extraterrestrial, while others are led to question, are we truly alone in the universe?
So, these dreams,
They're different this time around.
What's up, Para fans? Welcome back to Paratruth Radio. My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin.
And I hope you enjoyed that audio trailer of my film. Please be sure to check it out. It is at ericscareback.com. You'll also find it on the Paratruth website. Of course, those links, as noted in the commercial, will be at the bottom of this video on YouTube, in the description, also probably on Spreaker as well. So be sure to check it out, guys. Let me know what you think. Hope you guys enjoy it. Beside that, man, good episode. You know, we had a good guest there.
Yeah.
Very interesting. It's a topic we don't really think about. And so definitely interesting and entertaining, I think, on my end anyway.
Well, and Josh is always a very intelligently spoken person. It just blows me away how intelligent he talks. Like,
so articulate. You know, he knows what he's saying when he says it. Unlike you and I, who are just
we just
obviously just going in circles, chasing our tails. Anyway, so I think we're just going to stay on this topic for a little bit longer here, not too much more. But the sense of smell. You and I have come across this in the past. We've come across this on investigations. We've come across it in our own homes. Mm-hmm. Walking down the hallway, wondering what the heck, where that perfume came from. Probably more so on my end at my apartment than you with your wife, because obviously
that should be where the perfume smells coming from.
Should be, yeah. So interesting thing. This is a phenomenon that happens actually quite often in paranormal investigations. Pretty much any type of ghost hunting show you probably have ever seen, you hear guys talking about some kind of smell that they smelled, or girls. There's some girls in some of the shows. And we also have friends who have done the same thing on investigations. People that we've been in contact with or worked with over the past, who have come across the same type of thing. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we don't have a way to really debunk it easily, other than asking someone else if they smell it, or of course trying to trace the scent down like a bloodhound and figuring out where exactly that source is. And that is something that has been done, I think, at least by me, maybe you too, where we've been able to really debunk what the scent is. However, there is the occasional scent that comes by and you just don't know what the heck is going on or where it's coming from, and it's really weird. Obviously, it must be paranormal to some extent. What I'm questioning or wondering is if a human spirit, assuming humans can be ghosts, isn't a physical being as a spirit, and since perfume in of itself doesn't have a soul, then how is it that the scent can exist in another realm?
That's a good question. I mean, even if it's demons, some people believe they're in hell. I think you and I are on the same page where we believe they're here on Earth, along with Lucifer. How they would smell like sulfur, because a lot of demonic cases, you have the smell of sulfur. Now, if they're not physical beings, how are they manifesting that smell? Other than, like I said, coming through that barrier, and that's the smell we're smelling as they come through onto our plane of existence.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, and one way it could be done is maybe not necessarily manipulating us, but somehow making us think we smell that smell, and then in a sense we smell that smell.
Right.
So,
I mean, obviously, there's no scientific evidence to prove that spirits are capable or incapable of producing a scent like that.
Right.
Demons included. I think they do have the power where they may be able to produce those scents, as they very well have the power to manifest themselves in any shape they want. Heck, Satan has been a serpent, a snake. We've heard stories of people seeing wolves and black dogs and, you know, all kinds of different creatures out there that have all happened to be spiritual, which very well could be demonic as well. You know, one theory that I do have, and this is actually playing, even though I don't believe it, this is playing along the lines of those who do believe that demons are in hell or can go to and from. If that's the case, then perhaps when they're in hell, they just happen to absorb the scent of hell, which is that sulfur smell, just as Joshua was telling us, this whole brimstone idea. And therefore, when they come to our plane of existence, we smell. It's like being by a bonfire, you know, and your clothes smells like a bonfire for the next 3 days. And same thing here. So that is a possibility. But again, I think demons, Satan included, is really trying their best to stay away from hell. They know that it's built for them. It's written in the scriptures. And so they're going to do their best to stay away from a place of torture, you know, as long as they can.
Right.
So,
well, one thing that I don't know how a human spirit would do it, but the reason they would do it, for example, not necessarily on an investigation, but numerous times where I think our grandfather is watching over me or is with me or whatever, I have the smell of Black and Milds, which is what he used to smoke when we were younger, were Black and Milds. Or, and this is going from a different sense, I've heard the old polka music that he used to listen to when we were younger. Even when we got older, he used to listen to that polka music. So I don't know how it's done, but somehow it's happening. I'm trying to figure out how to wrap it up as to where I fall on this, because yes, it could be paranormal, but like Josh said too, there are scents that will get into clothing, into couches, into different fabrics, and then it just radiates that smell, especially if you're doing an investigation in a very old location. Right. So it's hard for me to decide what side of the fence to land on here.
Right. No, I understand completely. And, you know, I think I'm going to kind of teeter-totter on the fence because I think both are right. I think there are some instances in which maybe a spirit can manifest some kind of scent for some reason or another. But I also think much of it is really in our mind, and we actually manifest it ourselves through our own thinking. Now, how many times have we heard that the mind is very powerful? And I think that alone, I don't know about you, but I mean, think about it. When you think of a Sour Patch Kid, your mouth begins to water. You already got that sensation. You haven't even tried it.
I've already got it just from you saying
exactly.
That.
You get that tingling right in the back of the jaw, you know, under the teeth, and it's like, oh man. I think it's really the same thing. The sense of smell is extremely important when it comes to human survival, and also just in regards to your other senses. You can't taste anything without the sense of smell. You know, and so it's very important. And I think smell is probably the most powerful scent that we have. Smell is probably the very last thing that we ever forget about someone or something. Period. We'll forget what someone looks like. We'll forget what someone sounded like. You know, we'll forget the way someone acted and things like that. But the scent of smell, when that comes around, you know exactly who that scent belonged to or what it belonged to, whether it be a loved one or a pet or a certain type of food or drink that you liked, things like that. So interesting stuff. Very intriguing interview today, and it was a lot of fun. But I don't think we really have much else to go with that right now.
Well, because, I mean, how much can you really get into paranormal smells?
You know?
I can honestly remember on one hand how many times we've smelled something during a paranormal investigation. And I joked around and said, walk up to somebody and say, "Did you fart?" Or, "Are you wearing perfume? Why are you wearing perfume? We're on an investigation." So, when you're on an investigation like that's the only way you can really debunk it, is find out if somebody else smells like that, or if somebody else has smelled it. So, yeah, I'm not really sure how much more to go on it either. I think we've kind of hit it where we need, because it's kind of hard to fall on one side or the other of the fence on this, because it could be both. It could be one or the other. It could be your mind making something up altogether. So,
right. So let's go ahead and move on to another small topic here. We've got some time left. Justin, you just made known to me this small article that you came across maybe a little while back about a program known as SpaceX. And this SpaceX is supposedly a program in which they want to take people on vacation to Mars.
Yeah.
Correct? I can think of so many reasons why they should not do that.
Well,
first and foremost,
I've come across a couple articles where I think there's another company as well. I'm not 100% on it. I've done a couple different headlines on it. I believe it was my last one that I just had done, where they're actually going to start out on the moon, or it might have been even a Chinese. Actually, yeah, I take that back. It was a Chinese Russian collaboration where they're going to try and go to the moon first and then go to Mars. But SpaceX is also working on that same premise of they want to get to Mars and start a colony, start a touristy type situation going on there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is there any indication as to what the time frame is before they start allowing or trying to get these people on vacation?
The Russian-Chinese collaboration was, I believe, 2019 for the moon.
For the moon, okay.
For Mars, it's a couple more years down the road.
I feel like there's just so much money that has to be invested into this type of project. I mean, not only is it the companies themselves who are going to shuttle people there that are spending millions upon millions of dollars per group that they take up there, but the people who want to go are going to have to spend millions and millions, because not only are they paying or helping to support the trip itself, but they actually have to prepare for it, much like you would have to if you're to go on a Mount Everest, only probably tenfold if you're going into space.
Right. Yeah. Well, and one thing that comes to my mind is there's so much stuff here that everybody has not seen yet on Earth to go see and visit. I think that it's inevitable that we will sometime end up in space, but let's not rush it, guys. We've got plenty of time.
Well, and I don't know if I brought this up on the show before, but I just read an article about a month ago about astronauts who have gone into space, and not even like to the moon or anything, but I'm just talking about the space station alone.
Oh, okay.
Astronauts are, and forgive me if I'm not exact on the number here. It's been a while since I read it, but astronauts lose a high percentage of bone mass, or bone density, I should say, when they're up there. Their bones actually become brittle. They lose almost 50% of their muscle strength within a week or two because there's no gravity to help, strengthen the tissue and things like that. The majority of astronauts who have been to the moon end up with brain cancer because of the radioactive rays from the sun. I mean, there's so many things that just can destroy you in outer space. I mean, people think, oh, it'd be so cool to be in space, but in reality, the toll on your body, it's almost not worth it.
Yeah.
And
just look at the Fantastic Four. I mean,
I think that's a bad example because that'd be kind of,
well,
if I could come back, and as a guy who can start fires and be on fire and fly, hey.
Yeah, but how much of a blessing is that really? I think it's more of a curse if you ask me. Especially if you can't control it.
That's true. That is true. If you can't control it, then you're kind of stuck. But it'd be cool.
Yeah, I honestly agree with you. I mean, like I said, it's inevitable that we will eventually end up in space. But there's just way too much factors in play that would hinder us from having a good time, if you want to call it that, and on the moon or even on Mars. Mars is, I believe, has a much heavier gravity pull than the Earth does, or if not much heavier, it's enough heavier that you would see a difference if you vacationed there for a week.
Right.
So next week, folks, to wrap it all up for you guys, we are going to be having on a good friend of ours, Jamie Glanville. He's a local here in North Dakota. We're going to be talking about extremely haunted locations. And I had come up with this because Jamie has had an investigation team here in North Dakota. Eric and I had an investigation team in Ohio, and we've, between the three of us, investigated some really interesting boobs.
No.
Yeah.
As you're reading that and talking about it, I'm actually wearing one of the original NSPS T-shirts that we had for our first investigation group. What a coincidence.
Well, and sadly, I think I had ripped through mine, so I don't even have it.
It's just your muscles. You flex for your wife, and
I'm the Incredible Hulk, yeah. So we'll be having Jamie on to talk about that. So I want you guys to make sure to stay tuned for that. As I've been saying every week, please make sure you check out radioandpodcast.com. Great set of shows on there, ours included, as well as fringeradionetwork.com. We're part of both of those networks now, as well as paratruthradio.com, where you will find the Patreon account link to donate if you so feel to choose to do so. And make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Write us a review. That will help us way more than if you contribute any money. I honestly want you guys to definitely do that over donating money, because that actually helps us way more. So definitely do that. So until next week, folks, where you will find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
Peace.
If you enjoyed this episode of Paratruth Radio and you would like to listen to it again, or are interested in listening to any of our past episodes, then you can find them at Stitcher, Blueberry, TuneIn, iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and the Fringe Radio Network.
Or for a one-time fix of all of your Paratruth needs, simply drop in to paratruthradio.com.
And of course, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram for brand new updates on our show every day.
Finally, we love bringing you fresh, entertaining media each and every week, but we can't do it without you. So please check out our Patreon account. Simply go to paratruthradio.com, click on the Patreon logo, and help us to continue bringing you the latest and greatest in paranormal research.